I think everything is good to go. I'm going to be going live here, camera on in a minute. I'm just making sure that everything is set the way I want it. I'm sure there will be mistakes because this is a live stream and this is my first live stream, and that usually leads to errors, so we'll just sort of see what happens. All right, it's about that time, folks. Let me turn this down just a little. That's up. There we go. Turn that down a little. All right, and we are live. We'll see how this goes. I'm pretty sure that there will be some errors along the way. I'm trying to kind of learn how to use this recording software and use OBS and use Restream kind of as we go. So I'm sure there will be mistakes, but nonetheless, here we are. I was going to say this was the inaugural Around the Sports live stream, but I did one back in May, where I did some baseball card openings, and those cards are right there behind my Kevin Garnett jersey. I'll probably get back to those once we get closer to baseball season. But today it is hockey time. I am decked out in my full Bruins gear. I got the flag, I've got my hat, I've got the sweatshirt, and I even have my Bruins slippers. So I am all decked out in blue and gold, or brown and gold, black and gold, whatever, and I'm ready to go. So we are going to we're going to do an NHL preview here. We are going to talk about a little bit of everything. We're going to spend some time talking about the Bruins and the Blackhawks, as those are, I guess, the two teams that are, I don't want to say nearest and dearest to my heart, but at least the Bruins are near and dear to my heart, and then the Blackhawks are something that have been have been put on me here over the last 20 years. Talk more hockey. I'm getting to it, Eric. Thank you. Just trying to set everything up. So what I want to do today is we'll talk a little bit about the Bruins and the Blackhawks more in detail. Talk about their strengths, their weaknesses, that sort of thing. Beyond that, we'll take a look at the new division alignments, break those down, and talk about kind of where I think those teams will end up. We'll look at some of the free agent signings, how those are going to impact, if they'll impact the bottom line for the teams that signed them. And that will be that. So let's start with the new divisions. So let me pull that up here real quick. Hang on. Like I said, this is all going to be a bit of a mess because I still don't know what I'm doing with this. So bear with me here. And I'll make it all work eventually. There it is. All right, so here is, I got to shrink my camera down now. Move me up here. And here our new alignments. I got to move chat up here too so I can see that. All right, the new division alignments, at least for this season. We'll start over in the East. You've got the Bruins, the Buffalo Sabres, New Jersey Devils, the Islanders, the Rangers, the Flyers, the Pittsburgh Penguins, and the Washington Capitals. The Central is the Hurricanes, Blackhawks, Columbus Blue Jackets, Dallas, Detroit, Florida, Nashville, and the defending Stanley Cup champion Tampa Bay Lightning. It's interesting that the Central has both the Stanley Cup champions and the runner-up Dallas Stars, both in the same division this year. The West is, I guess, West is debatable since St. Louis is in the West, but you've got Anaheim, Arizona, Colorado, the Kings, Minnesota, San Jose, St. Louis Blues, and the Vegas Golden Knights. And then the North could very well just be called the Canada Division: Calgary, Edmonton, Montreal, Ottawa, Toronto, Vancouver, and Winnipeg. What do I think is the toughest division? That's a great question, Eric. That was actually the first thing I was going to get to today. I think the East is probably the most competitive. I think it's easy to say the Central is the toughest because you have both the Stanley Cup champion and the runner-up in that same division, again in Tampa and Dallas. But I think top to bottom, I think the East is the most difficult division. The Bruins were the President's Trophy winners a year ago. They had the best record in the NHL. Washington, obviously they're without Braden Holtby this year, but they're always a tough out. Pittsburgh with Sidney Crosby is always a challenge. And then some of those other teams, the Islanders specifically, the Islanders have gotten better over the last couple of years. The Rangers have had a lot of high draft picks the last couple of years. Obviously, Alexis Lafreniere, the number one pick last season. Philadelphia is a much improved team. So I think the East is probably the toughest top to bottom. But I like the way these divisions are set up. There are a couple of matchups that I think we're going to miss this year. As a Bruins fan, this is the first time I think since the 40s I saw that the Bruins aren't going to be playing the Canadiens this season. So that's a matchup that I'm going to miss. But I think that, for you Blackhawks fans, you're going to get to see a lot of Chicago and Detroit this year, which will be nice. Each team is only playing games within their own division. So it's a 56-game schedule. You're in the East, for example, the Bruins are going to play each one of those 7 teams, each one of those 7 teams 8 times. So you're going to see a lot of Boston, Buffalo, a lot of Boston, New York, a lot of Boston, Pittsburgh, or whatever. And same thing in the Central. You're going to see the Blackhawks against the Red Wings 7 or 8 times this season, which is one of the, obviously it's an original 6 matchup, but it's one of the oldest and best rivalries in the NHL. So I think they did a good job with what they could do. I mean, I think, they obviously didn't want to do a bubble again. There are going to eventually, I think, I know in Boston they were talking about potentially having fans back in the stands in February or March. So this reduces the travel. You're seeing it in the NBA right now as well, where teams are playing back-to-back games against the same team on their home court. Like the Celtics are playing back-to-back games in Detroit against the Pistons right now. So it limits the travel, which is a good thing. And we get 56 games in like 95 days or something ridiculous. So these teams are going to be playing a lot in a very, very short amount of time. I think the weakest division here is the North. It's going to be really interesting. I think the most talented team in the North is probably Toronto, but you never know what you're going to get with the Maple Leafs. Offensively, they are loaded as always, but the question with the Maple Leafs will always be their defense. And same is true in Edmonton. They've been underperforming for the last couple of years. They have the best hockey player in the world on their team, and they haven't been able to make much noise either. So I think the North is probably the weakest of the 4, but I like the idea of the Maple Leafs. Yeah, I think they're probably the team to beat coming out of the North. And I'm gonna lay out my rankings here in just a minute. I've got a Word document up that I'm gonna type out my final rankings, and we'll see how I do at the end of the season. But that being said, that Canada division or the North division is the Maple Loafs. Yes, as a Bruins fan, I love seeing the Leafs struggle like they do. They sign Austin Matthews to a huge contract, and they're struggling to get Mitch Marner signed, and so I don't have a problem with it. It's also a team that gave us Tuukka Rask for virtually nothing, so I can't hate on them there. But I did an interview last month with Jimmy Murphy, who is he's been writing for the Bruins and writing about the NHL in Boston for 15 or 20 years now, so he knows his stuff. He's really connected. And he said a couple of times to look out for the Ottawa Senators, that they've got a lot of young talent, and he actually expected the Senators to make a playoff push this year. So that could be an interesting team to take a look at, and I actually have. We'll get to that in a second. So let's go division by division here. Let's start with the North. And I'm going to, like I said, I've got a Word document up here that I want to, let's see if I can make this work correctly. Where is it? Here. All right. So let's turn that on. Let's switch over here. Oops. Move the chat window again, and let's go here. So we've got the West, the North. We're just going to do the North first. North, Canada. So I think I think the best team coming out of that division is, like I said, is the Toronto Maple Leafs. I don't necessarily think that it's tough because, again, they're probably the most talented team if you look at their roster. And I'm going to bounce around here a little bit. Like I said, this is going to be a little wonky while I kind of get a feel for how I want to do this. So we go to Hockey Reference here. And let's take a look at the Maple Leafs. So last year they finished 36, 25, and 9. And offensively, they're just stacked. Matthews, Marner, Tavares, and Nylander. They lost Tyson Barrie in the offseason. But offensively, they're as good as anybody else. It's defensively that they're going to struggle. I don't know if this has their updated rosters on it yet. Let's take a look. I don't think it does yet. It doesn't have their rosters as of February 1st, so we're not quite there yet. So offensively, you know what you're getting with the Toronto Maple Leafs, but their question is always defense and goaltending. Frederik Andersen, you can see a difficult season last year with the goals against of almost 3. So you never know what you're going to get with them, but I do think that they are still the most talented team in that division. So I think they're going to be my pick to win the West, or win the North, rather. I think you're going to have Edmonton come in after them. And again, Edmonton's another one. They actually signed Tyson Barrie away from the Toronto Maple Leafs. So they picked up a solid top pairing defenseman there to help them out. So I think Edmonton's going to finish number 2. Number 3, I think, is going to be Winnipeg. Winnipeg has the goaltending. Connor Hellebuck. They've got some... they're another team with just fantastic offensive weapons. If we pull up their roster here. That was this year, which doesn't show up yet. Where are we going? Right here. Nope, that's not it. That's the timer. There we go. So again, another team just loaded offensively. Patrick Laine, there's been some talk about trading him, but they've got as good a top 6 as you're going to find in the NHL. They do also have some defensive talent. Josh Morrissey's a very, very solid defenseman there. But again, really, really good goaltending and a good top 6. Winnipeg can make some noise if all of these players step up. There's been talk about Laine, like I said, wanting to be traded, but also not bringing his A game every week. Blake Wheeler's getting up there in age, but again, top 5, top 6, you don't get much better than the Winnipeg Jets. So we're going to stick the Winnipeg Jets there. Winnipeg Jets I think are going to finish 3rd. Calgary, the Calgary Flames, they're another team that made some noise a year ago. Let me pull up their roster here. And this is kind of how I wanted to do this. I wanted to just look at their rosters and talk a little bit about the teams, each team individually for just a couple of minutes. So if we look at the Calgary Flames, again, got to click on the right one. Matthew Tkachuk, Johnny Gaudreau, about as good as you're going to get there. They're strong up the middle. Mark Giordano on the back end is getting up there in age a little bit, and a pretty solid goaltending tandem. Not great, but Cam Talbot and David Rittich are not a bad pair. So they've got some skill. They've got some talent. I think they're going to be better than some people expect. Johnny Gaudreau had an off season for him last year. Only scored 58 points in 70 games. Johnny Gaudreau normally has been a point-a-game guy for the previous really almost 4 seasons, down a little bit in the 2016-2017 season, but he was basically a point-a-game guy for his first 4 of his first 5 years. So last year, took a step back a little bit, only scored 18 goals in 70 games, so you expect more out of him there. So the Calgary Flames are going to finish 4th. From there, the Ottawa Senators, the Vancouver Canucks, and the Montreal Canadiens, I think, is how that division is going to wrap up. The Canucks are another team that are loaded with young talent. If we take a look at them, Bo Horvat, and let's pull up the rest of the roster here. Vancouver finished strong last year. Elias Pettersson, Bo Horvat, Brock Besser. They've got, again, it's not a deep team, but a solid young core. You look at the age of some of these guys, 21, 20, 22, 23. Quinn Hughes, 20-year-old, scored 53 points as a 20-year-old last year. So, again, another solid but young team, so unproven. Have to see how they do. So that's how I think. Let me pull this back up. So that's how I think the East or the North is going to wrap up. Toronto, Edmonton, Winnipeg, Calgary, Ottawa, Vancouver, and Montreal. Let's do the West now. I want to do the 2 conferences or the 2 divisions, I guess, that I guess we as Bruins and Blackhawks fans don't have a ton of rooting interest in. So let's go back and look at the what was, here we go. Let's go back and look at this again. The divisions. If I can pull this up. Turn that one off. There we go. So Anaheim. Oops, you guys can't see it yet, right? McDavid or Draisaitl? I mean, Draisaitl had the better year last year, but some of the things that Connor McDavid can do on the ice are just it's kind of cliche, but he floats. I mean, he's so fast and so strong, and his hands are so good. I don't know how you could say that anybody other than Connor McDavid is the best player in the NHL. The numbers may not always be there. In fact, let's take a look at Edmonton. The numbers may not always be there, but I don't know how anybody can say that it's anybody other than McDavid. Let's pull that up again. Sorry, I got to keep moving the chat window here. Let's move it down here, get it out of the way. All right. So, yeah, Leon Draisaitl, just an absolutely monster year last year, 110 points in 71 games. Connor McDavid only had 97 in 64. I think obviously if McDavid plays the same number of games, the points are going to be a whole lot closer. I think for what McDavid brings to the table, because he doesn't just, special teams, obviously power play, penalty kill. I think Connor McDavid at 23 is just, speed, strength, IQ. I don't think there's a better all-around hockey player in the NHL than Connor McDavid. Usually you see a lot of these young guys come in and they can put up a point a game or they can put up 40 or 50 goals, but they struggle in other aspects of the game, be it playmaking or defensively or on the PK, or, they can't be trusted on the PK, or, they don't, they struggle along the boards, or McDavid just doesn't struggle at anything. And he's been doing it now. He's only 23. It feels like he's been around forever at this point. He's only 23. He's just finished his 5th season, and he's really, he's getting better You know, I mean, his numbers were down last year because he only played 64 games, but he's just getting better. So I think I think it starts with Connor McDavid. I think Draisaitl had an amazing season last year, but I think Connor McDavid is going to be at the top of anybody's NHL top player list. At least that's my take on it. So over in the West, we've got Anaheim, Arizona, Colorado, Los Angeles, Minnesota, San Jose, St. Louis, and Vegas. This is a very, very top-heavy division, in my opinion. I think that the 2 or 3 teams at the top of the West are going to be so much better than the teams in the bottom. I think you start with the Vegas Golden Knights, who... I mean, there's never been a story like the Vegas Golden Knights. I mean, an expansion team 3 years ago now, finished with they lost in the conference finals in their first season, and they've only gotten better the last 2 seasons. They had 86 points in their first season, 93 in their second, and then 109 points last year. They're only getting better, and they made the big free agent acquisition in the offseason as they signed Alex Pietrangelo away from the St. Louis Blues to improve a below average defensive blue line or defensive front, I guess, whatever you want to call it. But they're a very, very well-balanced team. I mean, William Karlsson did score 40 goals last year, but you look at this, they had 9 or 10 players score at least 10 goals, along with some players that you wouldn't. I mean, Riley Smith put up 60 points in 67 games. He was traded from the Panthers to the Bruins, and then the Bruins left him unexposed left him exposed, I guess, in the expansion draft. He's had a great career with Vegas. Jonathan Marchessault is another one who's been there since the beginning. So this team just keeps doing it, and then they've got the goaltending to really take them all the way. I mean, Marc-Andre Fleury and Robin Lehner, who they picked up in a trade from the Blackhawks last season, their goaltending is as good as anybody else's in the NHL. So they are my pick to take the West. And again, I think the West is really, really top-heavy. So I think Vegas, I think the 3 teams that in the West that are head and shoulders better than the rest, Vegas, St. Louis, and Colorado. I think those are the 3 teams that are going to kind of run roughshod over the rest of that Western division. I think Vegas is going to come in first. I think St. Louis is going to finish second. The Blues continue to just restock. They won the Stanley Cup 2 years ago, and then this past season they lost, as I mentioned, Pietrangelo to Vegas, but then turned around and signed Torrey Krug away from the Bruins. So the Blues just continue to stock up, and they play a very solid two-way game. They're not going to blow you away offensively. Let's pull up St. Louis here. So last year they finished 42, 19, and 10. They lost in the first round after winning the Stanley Cup the year before. But again, just another well-balanced team. That's 3, 6, 9, 10, 11 players scored at least 10 goals for the Blues last year. Vince Dunn added 9. So, top to bottom, 4 lines. They just continue to roll out 4 lines. And they're not, they're not old. You look at the age of some of the players. Ryan O'Reilly's sort of their main star, if you will. He's only 28, but they got a lot of players in their mid and lower 20s. So the Blues aren't going anywhere. The Blues are not going anywhere. Don't sleep on the Kraken. Yeah, we got. I'm interested to see how they are going to. How they're going to handle things, or what type of success they're going to have. You hate to say that Vegas set the bar for future expansion teams, but it'll be very interesting to see if they're able to have the same sort of success or, any success as I pulled that. That's not what I wanted to do. As I said, the errors are going to happen here with the first live stream. I am working through some of this stuff, but I wanted to get something out today, so here I am. Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Seattle has what type of strategy they go for. Do they look for those undervalued players, or do they take tradable assets, or do they just go young, or do they look for players? Do they look for players that they can move? Yeah, Vegas, they did set the bar. I mean, it's a shame that the bar was set that high for future expansion teams, but Vegas showed that you can do it if you do it right. So it sounds like the Kraken are putting the right people in the right places. So we'll have to see how it goes. But yeah, I think in that Western division, I think Vegas, St. Louis, and Colorado are really the three teams that that are going to be head and shoulders better than everybody else. And the Avalanche are an interesting team because they have what some would consider to be the best line in all of hockey. I question it a little bit being a Bruins fan, and I get to watch Bergeron, Marchand, and Pasternak out there on a nightly basis. But Colorado really with I think it's McKinnon, Landeskog, and Rantanen, I think, is their top line. That's as good as any line in the NHL. Nathan McKinnon is a top 5 talent in the NHL. He's only 24 years old. Again, this is another super young team. So I think that's kind of the one thing that's going to hold them back from maybe leapfrogging either Vegas or St. Louis this year, is that they are so young. Both of those teams are, I guess, what you would consider battle-tested. St. Louis obviously winning the Cup 2 years ago. Vegas has made the playoffs each of their first 3 seasons. So yeah, I think Colorado is just an incredibly talented team. Cale Makar is probably the top defenseman in the NHL under the age of 25. I mean, he's just phenomenal. Samuel Girard, another 21-year-old defenseman they have back there. They're stacked top to bottom. Goaltending isn't terrible for them either. Philip Grubauer did a pretty good job last year. So, it'll be, again, this is a team that if it clicks for them, they could steamroll through that kind of that Western division this season. But I think they're going to have a tough go of it against St. Louis and Vegas, two teams that have got sort of that playoff tested experience. So, and then the rest of the West, it's a toss up. It's a crapshoot. You got Anaheim, Arizona, Los Angeles, Minnesota, and San Jose, and Los Angeles has done some nice things. They finished last season really, really hot. I think they won their last 7 games in a row or something like that. So they're going to be really, really hot, or they ended the season really, really hot. They've got some young talent, but again, I don't think any of those remaining 5 teams really have a shot at coming out of the West as the division winner. I think you got a lot of average and below average teams that are going to beat up on each other throughout the course of the season, and then again, Colorado, St. Louis, and Vegas will probably do some pretty significant damage to those other 5. So let's move over to the Central here a little bit, and let's talk about let's start with the Blackhawks. Let's start talking about the Blackhawks before I talk about where I think they're going to end up and what I think that division is going to shape up like. And Eric, we talked a little bit about this on your show earlier today, actually, and basically the way I summed it up was bad goaltending, no depth on D, and weak down the middle. And that can make for a difficult season. And I think that's what you're going to see, unfortunately, if you are a fan of the Chicago Blackhawks this season. Let me pull their roster up. Obviously, it's changed a little bit. For some reason, Hockey Reference hasn't updated their roster, have not updated the rosters, and I don't feel like hunting through, or I don't feel like pulling up different websites to do it. So, we've got some injuries right off the bat. Obviously, Kirby Dach is out. His wrist was bent sideways. I don't know if anybody saw that photo, but that was an ugly photo of a human wrist. He's going to be out for a few months. Jonathan Toews is out with an undisclosed illness. It's very ominous when they don't talk about the specifics of the illness or the injury. Yeah, Detroit and Chicago are going to be terrible. But hey, you get to watch it 8 times. So, you get to watch one of the oldest rivalries in the NHL go head-to-head a bunch of times this season, even though both teams are terrible. So no Dach, no Toews, no Nylander, and Dylan Strome is still unsigned. So where's the offense going to come from? Obviously Patrick Kane is Patrick Kane. And, another 84-point season in 70 games last year, another 30-goal season. But at some point, you're going to be able to stop him. When he's all, and I'm sure at this point in his career, he's used to facing top-pairing defensemen when he's out on the ice. But there really aren't many offensive weapons on this team, and again, this doesn't even get into the weaknesses in terms of the defense and the goaltending. But Kane and DeBrincat, that's really it right now. This is a great one thing I will say is that if Dylan Strome is the answer Jesus, can he make a pad? Can he make the butterfly save? It is an opportunity for Strome this year. If he does sign and he gets to play that first line center role alongside Patrick Kane, it's an opportunity for him to really show what he's capable of, because that's where he's going to slot in once he signs. So it's a good opportunity for him. Goaltending wise, the Blackhawks are a train wreck. Again, something I mentioned, I said on your show earlier today, they go from Lehner and Crawford to Subban and Delia. That's a significant step down, and you can get away with weak goaltending if you can outscore the competition, or you can get away with a lack of offense if you have an elite goaltender. But you can't do both. You can't have a shallow offense and poor goaltending and expect to compete. So this could be a very, very difficult year for the Blackhawks. Like top 3 pick, difficult year for the Blackhawks. At least the Red Wings have been bad enough for the last couple of seasons where they've been able to acquire some top picks. Blackhawks drafted Dach, and he's going to be out for a while. So those two teams are going to be pretty awful, and they're going to be fighting for that probably the 7 and 8 spot in the Central Division. I think far and away the best team in the Central is still the Tampa Bay Lightning. I think Tampa, Dallas, Columbus, Carolina is probably how that division is going to shape up. Nashville could slide in there ahead of Columbus or Carolina. You're right. They lucked into getting Kirby Dach. So it's at some point. I guess the thing about hockey is you don't have to be bad that long, right? It's not like professional baseball where you draft somebody at the age of 18 and you have to wait 5 years or 4 years for them to make an impact. If you're bad and you're bad for 2 years, you can restock those shelves pretty quickly with top 3, top 5 picks, and you can be right back in it. The Blackhawks are they're going to have some very difficult decisions to make. This has got contracts, right? Where are we going? I think this has contracts. Oh, maybe it doesn't. But they're going to have some decisions to make with their contracts. They're getting older at some key positions. Kane and Taves are obviously the two big ones, and I don't know if they'll ever be moved. You could probably at this point get a king's ransom for Patrick Kane. Is that the right move? Do you tear it down completely, or do you try this kind of rebuild on the fly that's becoming more and more popular? That's one of the things the Bruins are doing, which I'll get to in a few minutes. The Bruins are trying to do a rebuild on the fly with their defense, and I don't know how well it's going to work out, but do you try to rebuild on the fly, or do you tear it all down and start over? And that's where the Blackhawks are right now. They have to decide whether the pieces that are there now, Kane, Taves, DeBrincat, Strome, Nylander, Keith at his advanced age, whether those are the pieces that you need to kind of take you to the next level in 3 or 4 years when some of these younger picks are able to actually make an impact, or do you just bite the bullet and say there aren't going to be anybody in the stands anyway this year, so let's just do it. Let's make those difficult decisions, and let's talk to some of these players who have got no movement contracts and see if they're willing to waive them, and let's see what we can get out of it. If you're gonna tear it down to the studs, this is the year to do it. I think one of the interesting things that we're gonna have to start to think about is that the 2021-2022 hockey season, not the one that's starting in a couple weeks, but next year. And not just in hockey, but in all sports, people are going to want to go. I think we're going to see record attendance levels in some of these leagues starting next season. People are going to want to go to sporting events starting, some people obviously want to go already, but once we're in a position where, the people who want to be vaccinated are vaccinated, people are going to want to go to sporting events. And that's not the time to be tearing it down to the studs and starting a rebuild. This is the year to start a rebuild if you want to do it. So the Blackhawks have some interesting decisions to make for sure. Starting this season, I think it's very likely that you could, see Duncan Keith moved, and I don't know what value, if anything, Brent Seabrook has anymore. I mean, that would be a salary dump, or you would have to eat the majority of the contract in order to get anything of value back. But I think Duncan Keith could go. And so it'll be, and the issue with the Blackhawks, as most of you know that are Blackhawks fans, is that they have so much money tied up in those 4 players, Kane, Taves, Seabrook, and Keith, that it's just been hard for them to once those players had any sort of decline at all, it was hard for them to come back in and replace or reload. There just wasn't the money to do it. So again, I think your central division is going to shape up Tampa Bay, followed by Dallas, followed by Columbus, followed by Carolina, then Nashville, Florida, and then Chicago and Detroit bringing up the rear. I think this could very easily be a last place season for the Blackhawks. They could very easily end up behind Detroit, especially if Taves doesn't come back this season. So we'll just see how it goes. But I think Tampa Bay is still clearly the best team in the NHL, defending Stanley Cup champions. They're absolutely stacked. They get Stamkos back, who was out for the playoffs last season, or most of the playoffs last season, and they won the Cup without him. They were able to re-sign the majority of their key players this season. So I think this is Tampa's cup to win again, someone's going to have to knock them off, and I don't know if anybody is talented enough to do it. So, again, Tampa, followed by Dallas, then Columbus, Carolina, and then the rest of the flotsam and jetsam, as you will. So let's move over to the East. And this was probably the hardest division for me to rank, because all of the teams are they're so tight in terms of their skill levels. There isn't a team in here. I would say the only team in here that the Rangers are. I think the Rangers are still a year away. I think the Rangers have some fantastic young talent on their team. If we pull up the New York Rangers, I mean, they had a pretty good season last year. They lost in the playoff qualifying round. Artemi Panarin, Mike Zibanejad, Ryan Strome, Anthony DeAngelo. Regardless of what you might think of his politics, Anthony DeAngelo is a pretty solid defenseman. And then, obviously, like I said, they picked up Lafreniere in the draft this season. They have Jacob Trouba. I think they're still a year away, but they've got one of the best offensive players in the NHL in Artemi Panarin, and it's got to be hard as a Blackhawk fan to see Panarin putting up those kind of numbers as a Ranger. They just priced themselves out of being able to re-sign Panarin with some of those other deals. So I think the Rangers are still a year away. So I think they're probably a step behind the rest of the East. But then in the Devils as well. The Devils are another team. I know. I'm sorry, Eric. It's tough. But you know what? I see it when I look at the San Jose Sharks and Joe Thornton, or I look at the Dallas Stars and I see Tyler Seguin. I mean, we've had ours too, so I understand how you feel. The Devils are another team that are really good up the middle and young at certain positions. Nico Hischier was their first round pick. What was it, last year or 2 years ago? I think it was last year. They're another team I think that's a year away. Mackenzie Blackwood, very, very young, very, very good goalie. So they've got some skill as well. But I think the Rangers and the Devils are probably your bottom. I say bottom feeders, but that's only because I think they're probably going to end up at the bottom of that division. Not that they're bad teams, but the top. I mean, you could put Washington, Pittsburgh, Philadelphia, the Islanders, and the Bruins in a hat, pull one out, and probably be happy with your selection. The Islanders came out of nowhere last season. I don't know. I mean, I think teams need to have. I think at this point, goaltending has become a two-headed monster. You just don't see Patrick Waugh anymore, who's going to start 70 games. I think Corey Crawford. I think he's going to help Blackwood. I think having an experienced goalie with a veteran goalie is a good thing. I don't know. I mean, is he going to make, they're playing 56 games. Is he going to make 20 starts this year? I mean, I think having an experienced backup goaltender is important to help develop youngsters. And if you make the playoffs, again, he's been there. He's won it multiple times. I think he can help the team from that perspective. It's similar to Zdeno Chara signing with the Capitals. How much does he really have left? But with what he has left, I think he can make an impact. It's just, I think it'll be more on the people around him than it will be on the stat sheet. Crawford played well last year, but he's obviously suffered injuries, and he's played a lot of hockey over the last decade. So I think he'll make an impact, but I don't know if it's necessarily going to be in the overall goalie numbers, but I think he'll help Blackwood, and I think he can help the team. So let's talk a little bit about the Bruins because, I mean, you just look at me. So let's talk a little bit about the Bruins. So the big news out of Boston recently is their captain and 14-year veteran of the Bruins, Zdeno Chara, signed a 1-year, $750,000 contract with the Washington Capitals earlier in the week. And there was a lot of consternation in Boston over that contract because what it signaled was that the Bruins had no interest in bringing Chara back. And what's come out is that it was sort of not a mutual decision, but the Bruins went to Chara and said, we want to re-sign you as a seventh defenseman, someone who, may play, half the games, and the other half of the games you're going to sit up in the rafters with everybody else and watch the game. And Chara didn't want that. And you can't fault him for that. You can't blame him for that. He got an opportunity to play with Washington, so he signed with the Capitals. I think the Bruins are going to... Chara had his limitations these last couple of seasons. His mobility was next to nothing. But when you're 6'9", and you can reach halfway across the ice with your stick, there's value in that. There's value in his experience. The Bruins obviously thought there was value in his experience, as the last 3 or 4 seasons he's been paired up with whoever the young let me pull this back up. Whoever the young defenseman was of the year for the Bruins. It was Charlie McAvoy, it was Brandon Carlo, it was Matt Grzelcyk. Whoever the Bruins had as a young defenseman, they paired him up with Chara to help that young player develop. And so the Bruins obviously saw value in what Chara could still bring to the club, and unfortunately they weren't able to work it out. So Chara goes to the Washington Capitals. The Bruins also lost Torrey Krug. So with that, the Bruins lost their 2 top left defensemen this season. So they are really, really thin at defense. Their top pairing this year is going to be Charlie McAvoy and Matt Grzelcyk. McAvoy, if he continues to develop, is very easily on track to be a number 1 defenseman, but it's really, really thin behind him. Once you get past McAvoy and Grzelcyk, you've got Brandon Carlo, who's still only 23 or 24, so he still has room to develop. But again, he's more of a defensive defenseman. He's not going to provide a lot offensively. His defensive partner is probably going to be Jeremy Lauzon. And that's kind of where things get a bit scary. The Bruins want to see what they have with the 23-year-olds. They're going to stick them with Carlo and see how it goes. And I don't know if you can, the core for this Bruins team is starting to get up there in age. Patrice Bergeron's 35, Brad Marchand's 32, David Krejci is 34, I believe. Tuukka Rask is 33. So some of the core players on this team are starting to get up there in age. And I don't know that going with a youth movement on defense is the right play at this point. I think they'll be able to get away with some of it because Tuukka Rask is still one of the best goaltenders in the NHL. So I think he'll save them in a lot of instances, but I don't know. I don't know how you can go from Krug and Chara to Lauzon and whoever you have as that third left defenseman. It's probably going to be Jonathan Moore. I don't know how. I don't see that. That's obviously a net negative for this team, and I don't know how they're going to perform. I guess we'll see. But it's the confidence level is not high from this Bruins fan when it comes to the defensive pairing. The upside, I guess if there is a silver lining because of the delay to the season, Brad Marchand, who had hernia surgery, is actually going to be back for the start of the regular season. David Pastrnak won't be. He's going to miss at least the first couple of weeks, likely more than that. So you may see Andre Kasha, who was their trade deadline pickup last season, on that top line with Marchand and Bergeron. You might see Craig Smith, who was their big free agent signing, on that top line. But with the Bruins, it's going to come down to what it comes down to every year. Are they able to get offensive production from somebody other than from that top line of Marchand, Pastrnak, and Bergeron? When do I think the Bruins will have to start making tough decisions? Now. David Krejci's in the last year of his contract. Tuukka Rask is in the last year of his contract. Tuukka's been making a lot of noise about retiring once his contract is up, so I don't know if he's got any trade value. David Krejci, I think criminally underrated. David Krejci is making $6 million this season. If the Bruins ever had any consistent wingers on either side of Krejci, his numbers, he'd be a point-a-game guy in the postseason. Playoff David Krejci is one of my favorite hockey players in the world. So I think they're going to have to start making some, and I think they've already started making some of those tough decisions, Eric. When they decided not to re-sign Krug and when they decided not to re-sign Chara, I think they've already started to make some of those tough decisions. I think, excuse me, I think Marchand and Bergeron are our Kane and Taves. I don't see Patrice Bergeron ever being traded. I don't see, especially with the contracts that they're under. One of the things that Don Sweeney does really well, and he struggles at a lot. He's had some difficult drafts. He hasn't been great at the free agent signings. But one of the things he's been able to do is get his players to take discounts on their contracts. Jake DeBrusk just recently signed a good value contract. Brad Marchand is getting paid. Let me pull up the Bruins contract situations, because they've got some good value on their roster, and that makes some of these decisions easier to make, because I mean, you're not going to trade. Let me find him on here. Of course, he's hurt, so he's not showing up on the list. But Charlie Coyle signed a $5 million contract. Jake DeBrusk is only making $3.6. Patrice Bergeron is making under $7 million right now. And, that's, $3 or $4 million less a year than Jonathan Taves? I mean, Patrice Bergeron at $7 million a year is an absolute bargain, even at age 35. So I don't think they have difficult decisions to make with those players, because I think those contracts are still really, really good. But they're going to have to figure out what they have defensively, and that's really going to be the big thing. They know what they have in McAvoy. Charlie McAvoy is a potential number one goaltender or number one defenseman in the NHL. Krejci's making 7.2, so he's unrestricted after this season. So he's somebody that if this team, if the season goes off the rails, Bergeron signed for the next 2 seasons at 6.75 or something like that. It's just a ridiculous contract. And Marchand, I believe, is signed at right around 6. So he's another one who, let me see if I can find it. Yeah, Brad Marchand is signed at $6.1 million a year for the next 5 years. So $6 million a year for Marchand, 6.7 for Bergeron. I mean, those are contracts that allow the Bruins to spend more money elsewhere if they can do it smartly. Now, they've got, just in Krejci and Rask coming off the books, that's $15 million in salary cap space next season. I don't think Tuukka Rask comes back after this season. I think they turn it over to one of their young goaltenders and then sign a veteran backup, because Jaro Halak is also in the last year of his contract. So I think a lot of those decisions are going to be made for them, because I don't think Rask is going to come back. So that's $8 million right there. That's a great. You look at the Bruins and the Blackhawks, 2 teams that had a whole lot of success in the decade of 2010. Obviously, the Blackhawks with 3 cup titles. The Bruins won 1 and went to 3 cups. The Bruins have been able to extend that window because they didn't have to sign Marchand and Bergeron to $11 million contracts, because I believe both Kane and Taves are making over 10, right? They're both making 10 or $11 million. That allowed them to sign, like David Pastrnak is making under $7 million a season for the next 3 years. He's making 6.7 a year for the next 3 seasons. So they signed Marchand, Bergeron, and Pastrnak for less than the Blackhawks signed Kane and Taves to. So yeah, it's just allowed them to spend a little bit more money elsewhere and have some additional depth when players get hurt, or they're able to make some. They made some. The issue is that they made some bad free agent signings, like signing David Backes to a $24 million contract wasn't a good signing. So they've made some poor decisions. But you're right, that's really the difference in the two teams. Is the Bruins didn't have 50% of their cap tied up in 4 players. So I think some of those decisions are going to start to be made for them this season. I think if the Bruins struggle, I don't know that they'll look to trade David Krejci. 'Cause, one of the things I said on your show earlier today is that real life isn't a video game. You can trade players in a video game. You can trade players in a video game because there are no emotions. They're pixels. But you can't do that in real life. I mean, you can, but you don't always do it. Is that Jim Backus was Thurston Howell on Gilligan's Island? I didn't know that. I wasn't a big Gilligan's Island guy. I watched it a handful of times, but so I think some of those decisions are going to start to be made for them. I think, like I said, I think Rask is probably going to walk at the end of this season. They're going to have to figure out what to do with their goaltending. I think Krejci, I don't know if they'll re-sign him. I don't think they're not going to pay him $7 million. I don't know if anybody will pay him that much. If you can bring Krejci back at a reduced rate for a couple of years, I would probably be okay with that. But they signed Charlie Coyle to a long-term deal, and I don't know if they want to be paying upwards of $20 million for 3 centers, which is what they would have to do with Krejci, with Coyle signed to what he's signed to, and with Bergeron signed to what he's signed to. So those are going to be the 2 tough ones. But your core players, Marchand, Bergeron, Pastrnak, I don't think they're going anywhere just because of what they're making. There's no real reason to trade them unless you think the window is completely closed. And I don't know that Bruins ownership will allow that. Jeremy Jacobs is all about the money. So I'm sure he knows what a kick in the nuts it would be if they traded Patrice Bergeron. So we'll see. So I think ultimately Philadelphia, and we come full circle and just out of the blue. I think Philadelphia takes the East this year. Philadelphia's always given the Bruins fits. I think Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Boston, Washington is probably going to be your top 4. I think the Bruins D is going to hold them back. Washington lost Braden Holtby and Henrik Lundqvist this year, so goaltending is going to be an issue for them. Philadelphia is really, really solid across the board. They've got really, really solid offense, pretty good defense, good goaltending as well. So I think Philadelphia probably takes the East. In terms of my champion, I think, again, I said this earlier, I think it's Tampa's to win, or Tampa's to lose, I guess, is probably the better way to put it. They're still the best team in the NHL. So, they got gritty. They got gritty, and I yeah, they have gritty. So anyway, I think that's gonna just about do it. We hit that hour mark. I stumbled my way through it. Like I said, these live streams are it's a one-man show, so I'm learning as I go. I will try to be a little bit I don't say more organized. I got everything I need right in front of me. It's just figuring out how to effectively do it without interrupting the stream. So I appreciate you hanging out, Eric. Thank you. I know you're a hockey guy like me. I look forward to seeing your show next week. Show to be determined is the name at the moment, so I look forward to checking that out. And yeah, my ultimate goal is to have something posted once a week. I think next Friday. I don't think I'm going to do a live stream. I think I'm probably going to do a pre-recorded post-mortem on the Patriots season because their season is officially over on Sunday. So I'll probably record something during the week and do my editing and have it posted on Friday. So my goal is to do something every Friday. Whether it be a live stream or just a video. And that's about it. So I appreciate you hanging out with me, Eric. And if you're watching this after the fact, you've got my predictions, and we'll take a look at them at the end of the season and see how I did. So until we talk again, thanks, guys. Bye, Eric.